Time to learn about that popular Wicked Harvest everyone's talking about. So issue 73 of No Quarter dropped, which, for the record, is the last issue of the official No Quarter magazine as we know it. Next issue, I guess, will be the first issue of No Quarter Prime. So in a way, this is a bit of a send-off, but also a pretty cool review of some really cool articles in here. 73 No Quarters. A long time. 12 years of No Quarter? So, as you can see on the cover here, we've got the Old Witch of Cador, Old Witch 2 on here now, so there's some really cool information about her. Of course, you're introduced to all the new releases, which has been all things Grimkin. The Wicked Harvest 50-point battle box is out, which I have received a copy of and did a review on as well, which is super, super cool. In fact, that army is now painted and ready to fight. New releases include The Child, the Death Knell, which everybody needs if you're playing Grimkin, the Plastic Skin and Moans model, Dreadrot, Twilight Sisters, Glimmer Imps, Cast Imps, those super fun Crabbits, Lady Carriana Rose, the Hollow Man plus the Lantern Man as a separate unit, Trapperkin, the King of Nothing, the Dreamer, Rattler, Cage Rager, and Gorehound. August also boasts the release of the hilariously silly and kind of terrible Nayslayers. These imps run around with horse heads on sticks, and yes, they're real horses. So after the new releases, they do some talking about what to expect in No Quarter Prime, but I think I'm actually going to save that to the end because I've got some thoughts on that. Now, there is another story in here because they keep expanding on the world that the Grimkin come from, and so there's some stories here of a Cadoran sniper that reminds me of one of my own personal Iron Kingdoms characters fleeing from the site of battle only to be found by the Lantern Men. There's also a really cool history article in here in their Guts and Gears side for the Cossite Woodsman and some specific information on Yuri the Hunter. I've actually had that model for years, and he's kind of scary. Like, I don't think he's a good guy. Of course, the Guts and Gears article also includes some information on how to best utilize the forces of Cossite Woodsmen, something we all could definitely learn from, as well as, use of your Manhunters and the benefits of Yuri the Axe because he gives the other Manhunters Tree Walker. There's also another article starting with issue 72 of No Quarter as they introduced Grimkin. The next article in issue 73 has more information about the actual models in the Grimkin. In this article, they actually go over the details of the Witchwood, Madcaps, and Cask Imps. So I like that they include little excerpts from old stories and folktales in their articles as they talk about the history behind these new models. The next article is just a 2-page spread, just like in issue 72, for Visions of War, which is the translation from the Cadoran runes in this spread. Now, just like last month, if you are interested in translating it yourself, feel free to. I will include the translation in the description to the video. But the implications are pretty exciting. Like, really exciting. And of course, what kind of issue of No Quarter would be if it didn't include some rules to a new type of game? They introduced the game Engines of Destruction, which is basically Mario Kart for your battle engines. Just like you would play in any normal game of War Machine or Hordes, your battle engines ram and shoot and fight each other to make it to the finish line. That's about it. No Quarter issue 73 introduces not one, but 2 new theme forces. One for Crix called Dark Host, and another called Krill Company for Trollbloods. So the Dark Host theme force is designed for everybody who wants to run all of the Banes. Now, if you'll recall from Mark II to Mark III, Bane Thralls did lose stealth. So in this theme force, they give them prowl. So half measure, half step to sort of give it back, which is understandable because stealth was pretty crazy. So part of the theme force also gives 2 4-inch AoE fog effects that stay throughout the game. So you can still pretty much get stealth to an extent. One of the things to remember about the Dark Host theme force is that all Bane models get prowl. So any type of Bane you want to throw in there can get the benefit, especially if you want to park them in that fog effect for part of the game. The other theme force introduced in this issue is Krill Company for Trollbloods. This theme force tends to focus on ranged attacks. So you're talking about bringing weapon crews, war beasts with ranged weapons, and stuff like that. Now, one of the cool benefits to it is that as part of the theme force, your models get to ignore other models in their faction for purpose of line of sight when making attacks. So that can be really helpful, as it points out for a bunch of medium-based dudes, trying to fire at like small-based armies, it can be really difficult to see past each other for that. And so this gives you an answer for that, especially if you're wanting to run a gun line. Now, of course, both theme forces are available in War Room if you have that app, or on the Privateer Press website under Organized Play in Game Rules and Errata. There's actually a PDF with all of them in there. Now for the part that's most important, the part I care about the most. The Gavin Kyle files for this issue covers Zavanna Aga, the Old Witch of Kador. Going back to prehistoric times, this girl knew Minoth like when he walked the earth, so she's been around for a while, and it's kind of cool because there's, it's as much as Gavin Kyle can find out, so you can only unearth so much of the history, and a lot of it really just goes back into her deep history. Prehistoric, hundreds of years, thousands of years ago. I mean, she is older than most things. Funny enough, it's only been in the last 100 or so years that Zavanna Aga has been rolling around with Scrapjack. It's just so cute and violent. But there are a lot of cool old stories and parables and people thinking that she's evil or people thinking she's really good, and you kind of end the article not really knowing that much more about her, but feeling like you suddenly know so much more about her. Does leave a lot of questions, though. Oh well. For those of you playing Undercity, Grimkin get an introduction into it. They give you a little one-shot to play. For those of you Protectorate players out there, or anyone following the lore, there is an interesting article in here about Darton Vilman, a paladin of the Order of the Wall. He runs into some interesting internal issues. For those of you who follow a lot of the Protectorate lore, there's always a lot of internal strife and power struggles, and Fiora trying to constantly game for power. And so this sort of, just gives a little more insight into that. Very much political intrigue. And it tends to, and it sticks within kind of the typical theme of the doctrine of Menoth, at odds with the morality of Menoth. Another exciting article is a preview of Company of Iron, which is the board game skirmish game that will be coming out in the fall sometime. I want to say October. They give you a little bit of insight into how the game will play because, for those of you who don't know, Company of Iron takes place without large base models, no large base warjacks. I don't know how that works for me. And without warcasters or warlocks. I mean, berserkers are basically light warjacks. And so it gives you some insight into how they're going to handle some of the weaker units in War Machine that would normally be made up for with a powerful Warcaster or Warlock, and how you can kind of shore up their shortcomings in Company of Iron. Seems like models in Company of Iron will also get basically saving throws, so that'll be kind of an interesting way to give some staying power to your little guys. And of course, one of the big other changes to Company of Iron is that you move your models independently. So you'll move a model, then your opponent moves one model instead of moving all of your army versus all of your opponent's army, which makes sense for the skirmish style game. I mean, you don't really, it's too small a points value to allow that big a swing on either side, so it makes sense. Grind gets another expansion. They actually add a few new grinders for your enjoyment. There's this molten grinder, which burns things, and a Garlgast grinder that reduces armor, and a Grindar the Nimble, which just seems like a big jerk that constantly tries to run away from you. And of course, new arenas. The battle report included in this issue of No Quarter takes place between Mercenaries and Grimkin and is actually Game 3 of a campaign they played, which is in the Wicked Harvest book. And the campaign's kind of neat just because it adds some different rules and strategies on how you need to win, different win conditions, which I think are pretty cool. And one of the interesting things about the campaign, of course, is as you lose units from prior battles, you can't bring them into your next battle. So, I don't know, I might have to try a campaign out. The last two articles details general information going on in the Iron Kingdoms after the Dragon Father fought his progeny up in the Wormwall Mountains, which is north of Caspia. The druids, the Blacklads of Circle Boros are there trying to clean up the blight, and it's affected certain Rulix in some crazy ways. Seems to me like they are hinting for some new blighted models coming down the pipeline. And of course, Privateer gives props to a couple of artists who painted the bust of Nemo. So congratulations to both of the winners. They did a fantastic job. And that's it. That is the end of No Quarter. But it's also the beginning of No Quarter Prime starting in September. They're pretty much planning to do a lot of the same stuff, except they do point out that the magazine is going to be ad-free. It is still going to be an every other month kind of deal. But one of the most important changes for No Quarter Prime is a new article called The Fire and the Forge, which will be a periodic article retelling the history of the Iron Kingdoms, since this basically started over a decade ago, and it would make sense to have sort of a centralized place that people can catch up, which is very exciting for both old and new players, because instead of having to find old source books and, you know, War Machine Escalation and the Apotheosis stuff, like, you don't have to gather, you know, from the far-flung parts of the world to try and find the bits of story to put it all together. It's actually going to finally be centralized here, and they might even come out with a compendium at some point. One can hope. And that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed my other Superfluous review. Hopefully next time I will be talking to you about No Quarter Prime. I am definitely excited for the new changes they have ahead, and I hope you've enjoyed this run of No Quarter as I have. It's a really cool magazine. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to let me know what you think in the comments. Are you excited about No Quarter Prime coming out? Are you going to be subscribing to it? Are you going to miss anything from No Quarter issues as they are? As long as they keep the Gavin Kyle files, I am on board. Well, we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!